I'm gonna show you how to take a scene that looks like this and turn it into something that looks like this. Much more dramatic. We are gonna be lighting this scene today, and this is gonna be a two-person scene, which could be used as a dialogue for a short film or whatever it is, or this could be an interview setup where the two people are pretty much facing each other for a conversation. The lighting, of course, is really flat. It looks pretty terrible. Just have all the overheads on in the house. We've got lights on here and there, and we got, of course, the practical lamp in the background, which we are gonna use. We wanna put some drama into this, add some shadow, and really shape the light. So with this type of lighting, it's called reverse key lighting, which basically means that the lights are going to be behind the subjects, not pointing directly at them with the same side of the camera. So it's called also upstage lighting. So the lights are going to be coming from behind, leaving the shadow side of the face facing the camera, which makes a much better, more dramatic look. Now, the difficulty with lighting like this is it's difficult to hide your lights and your light stands because they're actually pretty much in the scene, not on the same side with your camera. So we're gonna be using a couple C-stands on either side. You can also use heavy-duty boom stands that often have counterweights on them to hang your lights if you don't already have C-stands with boom arms on them. Obviously, this is a super wide shot on a 16mm here, so you can see everything, but on the actual more close-up shot, we're using a 50mm on an APS-C camera, so the Fujifilm brand new X-T4 camera. So it's much more zoomed in at around about 80mm. So it's gonna make it much, much easier to hide these lights and all the stands and everything like that. So we have the first light up, and this is a falconized light, full RGB. I've done a full review on it before. If you want to check it out, I'll link it up above. But basically, we've got a honeycomb grid on it, so that's gonna help control the light, make it much more directional so it doesn't spill onto the background or the foreground or anything like that. Keeps it really directional. Now, obviously this is just one light so far, but really we're only gonna need two lights for the most part to light this scene because they actually serve two purposes. So this light is giving a backlight to model number 1's hair. So gives her a nice backlight, edges her from the background, and then it's also providing a key light for model number 2 to give her a nice light right on her face. So it's twofold. And that's a great thing about doing this kind of thing. You can get away with a really great lighting setup with just two lights. So now I'm gonna get the other one set up and we'll see how that looks. Here's what the setup looks like with just one of the key lights turned on. For the second light, I just used a cheap, newer LED light panel, and I chose this one because it's so light and small, so it's really safe and easy to put on the end of a boom arm. You really don't want really heavy lights on the end of boom stands. Even once you put a sandbag on a C-stand, it still has a risk of tipping over. So if you want to use heavier light fixtures, it's a good idea to use really heavy-duty boom stands. I set both of the lights to 3200 Kelvin because I wanted a nice warm light on their skin tones. And it's looking pretty bright right now. She has a ton of light on her face, very bright. We actually need to bring that down some and get a little more shadow. And then you can see on our model on the right, now the back of her shirt's really lit up. And the back of her hair is really lit up with that hair light. But I think it's just a little too much, so we're gonna dial it back a little bit here, see if we can get a more moody look. You can see that, obviously she has a really good back hair light, and there's another great back hair light here as well. And because it's that reverse cross key, that means that they're cross keying each other. Each light is coming across and hitting the other subject. So there's this nice soft light coming in from each side. And of course, like I said, that nice back hair light. Now it is pretty bright. So I've turned these lights down pretty much just about as low as they can go. This is at 10% and we've got this one at 15%, but they're pretty well lit. We kind of want it to look like that practical light is the key motivator for the light here. Like that lamp in the background is providing this light coming from it, but obviously it's not. These two giant lights are providing that key light, but the practical is meant to be the motivation for the light. Now, personally, I don't think that this looks quite warm enough. So I'm gonna try and warm up that back bulb and make the scene look a little bit more warm and inviting. I've grabbed an LED light bulb, and I believe this one is around, 2000 Kelvin. So it's super warm, much warmer than that one. And I also don't like the harsh shadows and lines on the background that are coming from the lampshade. So I've shown this trick on the channel before, but just grab an old white sock and actually put it over the light bulb, and it softens it way down, gets rid of that shadow, and there's no risk of fire or anything like that because these LED light bulbs are so nice and cool. So let's get that swapped out. Okay, so now that back lamp is obviously way, way dimmer, and from this angle, you can barely even tell that it's on, but from our main key angle, it just provides a nice warmth and a good motivator for these lights. So much better look, and it doesn't actually spill onto our talent at all. We wanna completely control the light that's coming onto our talent with these lights and not have any practicals in the scene spill onto our subject and kind of ruin our nice lighting. As you can see in our main A camera, if both of our subjects kind of look at each other here, obviously this kind of feels like somewhat of an awkward situation, but maybe they're just chit-chatting, hanging out late night, whatever, just talking and stuff. It doesn't have to be on two couches. It could be on two chairs or two people standing in a room or a hallway. It doesn't really matter. This is just the situation that we have here. Anywhere you have two people basically talking to each other, this lighting setup will work. And of course, like I have done here, booming it out on two C stands of course helps, because now there's of course no light stand underneath the light, so you can shoot directly at it and you're not gonna have a problem with the light stands or anything like that getting in the shot. Now there are a whole bunch of different ways to do this. If you don't use C stands like this, you can use a grid overhead. You could use like a cupola bar and basically put it between two walls, or use a wall spreader and hang the lights. So if you have more grip and equipment, that's definitely a fantastic way to do it. And the way that I would prefer to do it is to hang the lights, because then you have full 360 degrees, you can look anywhere in the room and you're never gonna see any lights. Each of them have a nice soft light on their face with a little bit of the shadows falling onto this side of the face, and then you have the shadows coming underneath the chin as well. Now you can make this even more pronounced and more dramatic if you shape the light a little bit more. If I put a honeycomb on each of these, I just don't have a grid for both of them. You could shape it more, you could flag the light a little bit more and make those shadows even more dramatic. And if you wanted them much more dramatic, you could get these lights pretty much directly behind their faces and point them this way, and they would get very dramatic and pretty much give you a split key lighting. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be a little bit more soft and bright on either side of their faces. Now, the back of the scene here with the curtains on the windows looked a little bit boring and uninteresting to me. So I wanted to liven that up just a little bit, but I didn't have a lot of time to put up a bunch of other lights. So I quickly grabbed my RGB tube light from DF Digital Photo. Now this is just a 4-foot tube light that's battery powered, really easy to put in place anywhere, especially if you got to move really quickly on set. So I threw that in the background and just put it at 5600 Kelvin so that it would look a little bit more cool. Now this could be a simulation of moonlight or maybe some other light or lamp fixture outside the window that's just kind of shining through. And I feel like that added just a little bit to the scene to help brighten up those curtains. Now, if I had more time, I probably would have grabbed a more powerful light and set it outside the window to shine it through, but we were moving quick, so I just grabbed that tube light and put it in the windowsill. To add a little bit more interest to the scene, I just grabbed a candle and put it on the countertop so that it would be in the foreground. Now that did a few things for us. One, it added a little bit more dimension to make the whole scene a little bit more 3D. And of course, you can see that slide and camera movement much more pronounced because there's actually something in the foreground. Now, a common problem that you'll get when you're using upstage lighting is lens flares. Now that's pretty obvious because you're pointing lights right into your camera, but the lens hood I was using just wasn't doing the job to cut out that lens flare. So I threw a matte box on there, and then I took that topper and just cut it down to right where we got rid of that lens flare. This first angle that I've been showing you would probably be more used in a narrative situation. But let's say you want to use this sort of lighting for an interview, you would move the camera over. This is a fantastic lighting setup for an interview that's a little bit more dramatic or intense. But if you want something that's really happy and upbeat, you're gonna wanna add a lot more fill light to the other side of their face. Speaking of the shadow side of the face, there's a couple simple ways to bring up those shadows if you don't like how dark it's looking. The simplest way is to just use a large white bounce card and keep it out of frame, but allow that light to bounce back into their face. Of course, if a bounce card just isn't doing it for you, you can simply add a fill light to the shadow side of their face. Now, personally, I don't like to do this because I really like the drama and shape that the shadows add to the face. When you're shooting a dialogue scene or interview, you're of course gonna get that master shot of both the subjects, but you also need to get over the shoulder shots of each of the subjects. The beautiful thing about this sort of lighting setup is all I had to do was actually move my camera and reframe on each of the subjects, and it looked fantastic. I didn't have to adjust any of the lighting or move any light stands because they were all out of the shot since the lights were boomed out overhead. And that's beautiful when you have to move quickly on set and you don't have time to readjust and move everything. For the over the shoulder shots, I did switch to an 85mm lens, which is a 135mm equivalent on an APS-C camera. Now, what this did for us was give us a more blurred out background and a tighter framing on our subjects so you could really just focus on whatever their lines are. This is one of my all-time favorite ways to light a dialogue scene, because with just 2 lights, you're getting a hair light on each subject and a key light. So it's just so simple and allows you to get coverage really quick without changing your lighting setup. So if you guys like this video, hit subscribe right now because I have a ton more videos coming out on lighting, shooting, editing, everything like that, and you don't want to miss it. All right, I'll see you in the next video.